बहुनां जन्मनाम् अन्ते बहुनां जन्मनाम् अन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते वासुदेवः सर्वम् इति वासुदेवः सर्वमिति सः महात्मा सुदुर्लभः स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते वासुदेव सर्वमिति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते वासुदेव सर्वमिति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते वासुदेव सर्वमिति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
वासुदेवः सर्वमिति
वासुदेवः सर्वमिति
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
ज्ञानवान् देव सर्वमिति
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
वासुदेवः सर्वमिति
वासुदेव सर्वमिति
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
वासुदेवः सर्वमिति
वासुदेव सर्वमिति
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
वासुदेवः सर्व इति
वासुदेव सर्वमिति
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः
बहुनां जन्मनाम् अन्ते
बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते
वासुदेव सर्वमिति
वासुदेव सर्वमिति
स महात्मानां सुदुर्लभः
स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः ऑनलाइन बहुनां जन्मनामन्ते ज्ञानवान् मां प्रपद्यते वासुदेव सर्वमिति स महात्मा सुदुर्लभः word to word meaning bahunam many janmanam births ante after jnanavan he possessing knowledge mam unto me prapadyate surrenders vasudevah cause of all causes sarvam
all
iti,
iti,
thus,
thus,
saha,
saha,
such,
such,
Mahatma,
Mahatma,
great soul,
great soul,
Sudurlabhaha,
Sudurlabhaha,
very rare.
very rare.
Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila
Jai
Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada.
Translation. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Translation with repetition. After many births and deaths,
After many births and death,
he who is
he who is
actually in knowledge
actually in knowledge
surrenders unto me,
surrenders unto me,
knowing me
knowing me
to be the cause of all causes
to be the cause of all causes
and all that is.
and all that is.
Such a great soul
Such a great soul
is very rare.
is very rare.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many, many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. In the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. But when one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life and that these activities constitute devotional service. Realizing this, he becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders to him. At such a time, one can understand that Lord Sri Krishna's mercy is everything, that he is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from him. He realizes the material world to be a perverted reflection of spiritual variegatedness, and realizes that in everything there is a relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Thus, he thinks of everything in relation to Vasudeva or Sri Krishna. Such a universal vision of Vasudeva precipitates one's full surrender to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna as the highest goal. Such surrendered great souls are very rare. This verse is very nicely explained in the 3rd chapter of Shvetashvatara Upanishad. In this body, there are powers of speaking, of seeing, of hearing, of mental activities, etc. But these are not important if not related to the Supreme Lord. And because Vasudeva is all pervading and everything is Vasudeva, the devotee surrenders in full knowledge. Bhagavad Gita 7.17 and 11.40. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we are reading from the 7th chapter, the knowledge of the Absolute, and text number 19. So, there are certain verses which are quite famous and which are recited by the devotees, memorized, and also not only memorized but also because they convey the essence or important aspects of the text, they are to be also understood. one such verse is this, and it says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante. So, Bahunam, many, Janmanam, births. So, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, after many births, and Prabhupada translates as after many births and deaths. So, even to understand this simple idea that there is actually many births and deaths, that means we take birth, life after life. Many people even may not agree to this point. Many people may think that this is the only life that I have got, and therefore, whatever I want to do in this life, I will just go on doing that. And at the end of the life, everything gets finished. And therefore, why should I worry about anything? Why should I know anything beyond what I just need for my basic necessities of enjoyment in this material world? So, even this idea that there is life after life, and that there is something that one has to be aware that what is going to happen in next life is also usually present in the modern life. At least in the past, in the past ages, people were conscious that if I do a certain sinful act, maybe I'll get some sinful reaction in the coming future. If not immediately, maybe in next life. Just like as we know, the karma, the seed of the activity, can fructify at different times. Some may take fructify immediately, some may take many, many lives. And therefore, people were very conscious what they are doing, because they knew that the laws of nature are so stringent that they cannot escape the reactions of one's activities. And therefore, they were at least conscious about certain activities that they should do and they should not do. But even people who are little bit conscious of that I should be careful for my future, they may still not be aware that what is that I should actually do, what should be my actual goal of life. If there is a life after this, what kind of life I should endeavor for. So, some people may endeavor for a life where there is more material happiness. Some people may say, I want the same wife and family life after life. Someone may say, I want the same business in which I am right now. So, Hare Krishna. So, even if one is aware that there is next life, what should be my next life should be, how it should be, what should be that goal that I should endeavor for in my next life. Just like we were hearing in today's morning class, tasyeva heto prayateta kovida. So, one may endeavor. Everyone is endeavoring. There is no one who is not endeavoring. But when one is endeavoring, is one really aware of one's highest goal of life? Is one really aware of whom one should follow in order to achieve that highest form of goal of life? One may not be aware. And therefore, as we see, in order to understand something which is much more finer and finer, which is much more refined in knowledge, people have to undergo many, many schools, many, many classes, many, many years of study to understand something which is much more complex. In the simple material world, just to learn something, people spend many, many years just to, get something known as a professional degree. But even that is a very, very small aspect of knowledge, a very, very minuscule aspect of knowledge. But if one wants to learn the highest perfection of knowledge, the highest truth, just imagine how many lives it must take. If one were to just study small things, one life is not sufficient. If one masters physics, one aspect of physics only he can study to a very limited extent. So what to speak of understanding the ultimate truth? People are not even aware that there is something known as ultimate truth. So people are of the opinion that there is no such thing as absolute truth. They think it is all relative. It is all relative. According to you, there can be one truth. According to me, there can be another truth. It is not necessary that there has to be really something which is true. So this is one of the modern conception that is highly propagated. That is, don't believe in anything absolutely true. It is all relative. It is all dependent upon what you perceive. If you like something, you can do that. There is no idea of objectivity. Objectivity, people think, is only when we study something material, there has to be some objectivity. But when it comes to really understanding the goal of life, really understanding happiness, really understanding the subtle aspects of life, even understanding who you are, people will say, I am what I think. I am what I feel. I am what I am doing. But people cannot really understand there is also an objective truth here. There is also, it is not just mental concoction, it is not just my feeling, but there is an objective reality to the world. So even to understand this small aspect is very difficult, that there is something which is true, and there is something which is ultimately true, which is absolutely true. So even to understand this, the modern education system is such a way tailored, especially in the Western world, is that one doesn't have to agree upon the different ideas one have got. So they say that because there is no truth, you don't have to agree upon any one thing. You can think the way you want to think, any way anyone wants to think, one can think. But there is another way of understanding of the world, that is, there is truth. There is an truth which is independent of my body and mind. That is, it is not dependent upon what I think, but actually there is something which is true. And as we see the example that Prabhupada gives, that is of fire. Just like a child may be aware or may not be aware, but as soon as one touches fire, it burns. So similarly, this idea that there is some truth is an important concept, and even to understand that, it takes many lives for people. So even after coming to understanding that there is some truth, now people assume that what is that truth? So some people think it is all matter. It is all matter. Everything is matter. Where is there anything else that I can see beyond matter? Whatever I see is matter. Whatever I can think of is matter. And therefore, there is nothing much more superior than matter. And therefore, people think this is all I need to care about, is how do I find material things? How do I find happiness through material things? So all that I need to do is to know more and more material science. The more and more material science I know, they think that they will make advancement. They will make advancement in their life. And that's how the modern world is driven, that all that you should know is only about matter. Because in their conception, it's only matter. And we can see that people, like in the modern world, when they make medicines, when they think of diseases, they only think of physical diseases. And they do not have any idea. For example, today mental health is an important issue, but because it is so subtle than the gross body, because they have no real knowledge of how to understand what is subtler than the body, we don't have very good medication for mind. They do not know, and therefore they recommend for yoga and other practices as a means to solve their mental issues or distresses. But anyways, so moving on from the idea that there is all matter, there are some people who think that mind is superior to the body, and that is all I need to know, worry about. And therefore, they focus on activities which give them slightly more subtler happiness beyond the body. And they think that understanding the mind is the goal of life, or understanding something beyond body, which is only mind, and therefore they are also known as the Western dualist. So Western dualists, they have only two truths. One is matter and one is mind. So their goal is to understand these two things, matter and mind. If they understand both of these things, they think they are perfected. But then, as we see from the Vedic literature, and also we can see that there are other kinds of religionists like the Buddhists who think that there is nothing actually true. All that is shunya, is empty. Ultimately there is nothing. It's just a matter of my desire that I'm in this space and time, and actually there is nothing. There is no beginning, there is no cause, there is nothing at all. And then there is another kind of people who understand the truth that everything is same, everything is Brahman, is spirit. There is nothing actually matter. There is no transformation of the spirit can take place. The Brahman, which is ultimate truth, it cannot transform into anything. As soon as it transforms into something, then as soon as it is changing, because if Brahman is absolute truth, how can it change into anything else? It has to be the same always. As soon as if I think that the Brahman, which is the ultimate truth, has changed into something else, then that truth has not remained the same, and therefore they think that everything is actually Brahman. So their goal of understanding is that Brahman is the ultimate truth. So, and the yogis, they think that no, there is something more than this, that there is the Supreme Lord in the form of 400 Vishnu, who is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, and he is to be worshipped and he is to be known. So in this way, each living entity, based upon different lifetimes that one spends, comes to different understanding of what is actually true. And here we are talking about the knowledge of the absolute. So from the knowledge of the relative truths of different kinds, to the knowledge of Brahman as absolute truth, to the knowledge of Paramatma as the absolute truth, and then to actually come to understand that Krishna says here, unto me, surrenders unto me. So, and he possesses knowledge. So, who is actually knowledge of the Supreme Absolute, the knowledge of the Absolute Truth as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very, very rare. In fact, it happens after many, many lives. So, that's how when we meet people, we can see that each one has a different goal. And most common, the goal is material goal. And so progressively, one makes advancement in understanding these different aspects of truth, but to really come to the understanding that the supreme, the ultimate knowledge is to understand the knowledge of the presence of the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his activities and his spiritual abode is extremely rare, and it happens only after many, many births. Then it is also important to note that because there are different goals, people also take different paths to achieve the goal. So they take to, just like morning we were discussing, Prabhu was explaining about how people take to the Vedic processes, the Vedic path. So the Vedas largely deal with three modes of material nature, and they only help one to elevate from one kind of mode of material nature to next, and so on and so forth. So there is a step-by-step gradual progress through the Vedic path. Similarly, there is ritualistic path. There are so many rituals which are mentioned in the Vedas, which when one performs, one gets more and more pious credits. So there is different process of penances, different practices of austerities. There are different methods of charity and so on and so forth, which are recommended in the Vedic scriptures. By all this, when one does, one is making progressive advancement in one's understanding of what is actually truth. But it is not necessary that one actually comes to understand that Vasudeva Sarvamiti, that there is one Supreme Personality of Godhead who is actually the cause of all causes, and it is he who is pervading all over. So this understanding is very, very difficult, and especially the two big problems which prevent one to understand these two things is the living entity's tendency to be, the one major problem is the mental speculation. because the living entity, for living entity to overcome mental speculation is very, very difficult, because the living entity is constantly based upon one's experience of life. One is thinking that he understands the world, and he is projecting the truth based upon his mind. So every living entity is projecting what is truth based upon one's mind. Or the living entity thinks that I can capture the truth by my mental endeavors. I don't need any external help. Why do I need a spiritual master? Why do I need any process? I know the process. I can do whatever I want and I will find out one day. Or why should I listen to any process, specific process? There is no specific process. That all paths lead to the same thing. So in this way, people speculate, and people are not willing to hear to the process or to the path as recommended by the Lord. Because of one speculation, the speculation prevents one from hearing. And when one does not hear, it is not possible to know the knowledge of the Absolute, because as we know, we acquire knowledge by three means. The first is pratyaksha pramana, by direct experience. By direct experience, or empirical knowledge, the scientific method. So one of the greatest faith that people have in this age is that of scientific method. And people think that by scientific method I can know the ultimate knowledge. It is progressing systematically, but it is important to note what is the method that is employed in scientific method. So the method that is employed in scientific method is of empirical knowledge or observation. So in order to observe, one must know that one needs an instrument and one needs an observer. Both the observer and the instruments are limited. As things become more and more finer, we cannot measure them very well. As soon as we cannot measure them, we cannot actually understand them very well. So one is the issue with the instrument, another is issue with one's own faculties. Our own senses can perceive very limited things. Our own mind can process very little information. Our intellect can discern very little. So with all these limited faculties of both our senses, mind, intellect, and the instruments that material science provides us, we can only understand a very small fraction of what is happening through these faculties. So one may assume that, okay, I am making some advancement here, there, the so-called advancement. Actually, the question of advancement is also a question, but just the idea that I can know things completely is faulty. There are so many things which cannot be measured. There are so many things which are not captured by the instruments. And those aspects of knowledge can never be understood by the method of direct perception. And therefore, the second anumana, therefore there has to be some hypothesis. Because I cannot directly perceive, now I have to do an indirect method. Because I cannot see millions of light years away from me, whatever the galaxy is there, I cannot make direct observation. I cannot understand what is happening in the smallest of the smallest atom. So I create different theories. And what is this theory? Theory is nothing but, and so theory means whatever I can observe, I match that into a theory. I create based upon what I observe. I try to make a theory so that my result matches with the answer, with the theory. But it does not necessarily mean that actually the theory is speaking truth. Actually the theory is speaking truth. And the example for this is that there are various theories which can talk about the same result. The output is the same based upon two theories, but the explanations can be different. So this is known as the fitting method in science. So science largely deals with fitting the observations to a model, but it does not necessarily has to tell the truth. So the pratyaksha and anumana, and then the shabda, the third method of understanding knowledge, is by hearing. Because the first two methods are limited, there is no way one can ever achieve perfect knowledge by these first two methods. Now the third method of knowledge, which is Shabda, or by testimonial, or by from the sound vibration. Now if a source of this knowledge is absolute, so it is not that any sound vibration that anyone can speak about the ultimate truth or the complete knowledge. No. If the knowledge of sound is coming from another person who is also limited in his faculties, who is also applying this anumana or hypothesis, then the sound vibration from him or the information given from that source is also not complete. But unfortunately, today we have put lot of faith. We have put lot of faith that the scientific world, or the people who hypothesize, the speculators, the philosophers, they so-called, by publishing in the papers, by propaganda, people have put lot of faith that this information is actually true. It is blind faith. It's also a faith. People think there is no faith here. They are all scientific. No. Who has done so many experiments? We all hear from them and we accept them. But actually we do not pay attention to what is the method of knowledge that they are acquiring, what is the method by which they are acquiring the knowledge, and what are the limitations of that knowledge that they are by which means they are acquiring. On the other hand, as we see here in this chapter, the knowledge of the absolute as revealed by the absolute source, the supreme person. Now one may question, one may say, how are you putting faith here? Why are you putting faith here? Rather I will put my faith in science. So as we saw in the previous verses, Chaturvida bhajante mam sukritino jana Arjuna. So one has to have pious activities. One has to be pious. It is not that the supreme truth is understood just like that. As we were also seeing in the morning, the word avartina, there is a covering. There is a covering by the material energy, which prevents one from seeing things as they are. So when we hear from the right source, as Prabhupada also says that if you want to buy gold, you must have some knowledge of gold. So similarly, when the first criteria should be that one must be seeking for the true knowledge. Because one is not sincere in seeking the true knowledge, one is misguided. One immediately puts faith wherever someone comes and says, this is gold. Because I am not knowledgeable, I don't have knowledge, I may accept, yes, this is gold. And therefore, people go to different philosophers, different so-called speakers who are so good in YouTube. People think, oh, this person is speaking so nice, he is joking, his way of speaking is nice. But what is the content? People do not pay attention. So the first criteria is that there should be sincerity in the heart to seek the real gold, the real truth. And then one has to hear from the right source. If one does not hear from the right source, then one can never understand what is actually true. And therefore, this process of Shabda as received from the scriptures. That is the reason why the Lord has left behind so many scriptures. Because it is through this Shabda that we can actually understand the real truth. And another place, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj says that truth is not subservient to you. Truth is not subservient to you, you are subservient to the truth. That means sometimes people demand that you show me God. Why should I? You are saying God exists, you show me God. If God is there, let him come here. If God is there, let him do this. So people think that one can command and know the truth, or one can command God and by which the Lord has to do something. But actually, in this scenario, one is not understanding what is one's own position. Even the truth of one's own position to understand is so difficult. And as we see in the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada says that in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leading towards impersonalism. So even after a lot of endeavor in spiritual process, one may actually make very little advancement only to understand that maybe he is not this body. Even to understand that small aspect that, I am not this body, I am something else. but to even to further elevate and to see, as we see Manushyanam Sahasreshu, there are thousands and thousands of people and millions of people, in that one may endeavor to actually understand, am I this body or am I this spirit? And amongst all of them, there may be one who may actually realize that I am not this body, I am spirit soul. But still one may not understand what is the ultimate truth. So in this way, we can see that in order to really understand the truth, we need to understand from the right source, the right knowledge. And that's why we can see in this very beginning of this chapter, the Lord is setting what is the means to acquire that knowledge of the ultimate truth. And Vasudevam Sarvamiti. So to understand that the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is the cause of all causes. He is the absolute truth that cannot be acquired by any other means apart from hearing from the bona fide sources of Vedic literatures, especially as from the mouths of the pure devotees of the Lord. Because these literatures are also so vast, and as we saw in the morning, like an ocean which is so vast, the shore of the ocean, it is very, very difficult to see from one side what is the other side of the shore. Neither one can assess the depth of the ocean. So similarly, one may have so many scriptures, but that does not necessarily mean that just because I have scriptures with me, I can understand the truth. No, it is not possible that way. So, and therefore it is being said here that Sa Mahatma Sudurlabhaha. So one who has actually understood the essence of the truth that is being presented, and not only who has understood the truth physically, theoretically, but who has actually realized in practice. And what happens when one realizes? One actually surrenders to the Supreme Absolute Truth. So when one acquires the knowledge, it is not that one is just theorizing it. No, there is an immediate effect, that is Mam Prapadyate. So there is a surrender. So one recognizes that the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes, and my position is that of part and parcel. And if the real Swartha Gatim, He Vishnu. So if I want my real self-interest, I cannot live separate from the Lord. Lord is the source of all pleasure. He is the source, He is the cause of all causes. And my position, just like a bodily part, hand and leg has to serve the body naturally, similarly, my position is to serve the Lord. So unless one doesn't understand the position of the Lord, unless one does not understand one's own position, one cannot surrender. And one who is in full knowledge of the Lord, he naturally surrenders. So that is, this verse is saying that after many, many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. And therefore, we must recognize that the presence of a pure devotee is such a rare thing. And associating with a pure devotee is such a great fortune. And therefore, we should always endeavor and be anxious to take more and more association of Srila Prabhupada through his books, through his Vani, and following his instructions. As we saw in the morning also, Prabhupada said, if you follow 4 regulative principles and 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, there is no question of separation from the physical distance, because the spiritual master is an external manifestation of Paramatma, and he is guiding each one of us individually. That is the special potency of a pure devotee. Just like the Lord is mystically and Yogeshwara, all potent and all powerful, by the mercy of the Lord, even pure devotees can do wonderful things. They can just guide, even without being physically present. They guide each and every of their disciples. So therefore, it is very important that we should recognize the position of a pure devotee, such Mahatma, who has understood the Supreme Lord as the Sri Krishna as the cause of all causes. And this should be one of the tests to see who is a Mahatma. When people come and say, I am following this Guru, I am following this Swami, that Swami, so we have to test, is he really a Mahatma? What is the criteria of Mahatma? Does he understand who is the source of all sources? Is he actually surrendered to the source of all sources? If not, he is not a Mahatma. So, this scientific understanding Prabhupada is presenting, it is Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam. So, and Vijnanam means Prabhupada is also, Bhagavatam is also presenting us a practical method to realize this knowledge. It is not just a theoretical principle, but also a practical ways. That is the speciality of the Acharyas. By their the practical method that they provide us, we can not only theoretically understand this, but also we can practically realize this. And therefore, it is important that this criteria of understanding who is a Mahatma should be applied whenever people talk about so and so person is a great spiritualist. No, only one who is actually fitting into this criteria is actually a Mahatma. In the purport, Prabhupada says that the living entity, while executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, after many, many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. So, we can see how it is such a difficult goal to understand the ultimate spiritual realization is to understand the pure knowledge of Supreme Personality of Godhead. But on the other hand, we can also see how fortunate we are that a pure devotee of the Lord, a confidential servitor of the Lord, who is very, very dear to the Lord, who is presenting all aspects of the transcendental knowledge in a very easy and accessible way, and helping us to very easily access that highest spiritual, ultimate goal of spiritual realization. So, and then Prabhupada is mentioning that in the beginning stages, one may lead towards impersonalism, and only after further more advancement, one can understand that there are activities in spiritual life. So, only when one engages in devotional service, bhaktya mam abhijanati. So, unless one does not perform devotional activities, so devotional activities means chanting and hearing, especially in this age, Shravanam and Kirtanam, as recommended by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Only when one renders these kinds of devotional service that one can develop one's attachment or understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One of the important reasons why one cannot understand the signs of God, as we saw even the previous verses, is because of one's existence in lower modes of material nature. When one is covered, when one's heart is covered with mode of passion and ignorance, one cannot actually understand higher truths. So, even to understand the aspect that I am not this body, I am spirit soul, one has to elevate to the platform of Sattva Guna and above. So, if in our day-to-day life, if we do not endeavor to come towards Sattva Guna, it is not possible for us to understand higher spiritual truths. In fact, Srila Rupa Goswami says that if one is in Sattva Guna, then naturally what needs to be done further will become easily revealed to him. It becomes easily understandable to the person. But if one is not even in Sattva Guna, then even the spiritual life becomes very, very difficult for one to make further advancement. So, here it is being said that when one makes that further advancement by rendering devotional service, one can understand that Lord Shri Krishna's mercy is everything, that he is the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent from him. So, when one makes further advancement, as we see even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said, Stavara Jangama dekhe, na dekhe tara murti, sarvatra hoya nija ishta deva spruti. So, this is the vision of Mahabhagavata, a pure devotee of the Lord. What do they do? Stavara Jangama dekhe. So, Stavara Jangama, that is which is inert and which is movable. Dekhe, he sees. Na dekhe, does not see. Tara murti, its form. Sarvatra haya nija ishta deva spurati. So, when a Mahabhagavata devotee, a pure devotee, is seeing something which is inert or something movable. He's not seeing the form of this. So when we see something, we see its form. We see, okay, this is table, this is chair, this is a cat, this is a dog. So we are seeing something as moving, something as not moving by its form. But what is a pure devotee of the Lord, a Mahabhagavata devotee is saying? He does not see its form, rather he sees the he immediately sees manifest the form of the Supreme Lord. So rather than seeing what is here as the outward form that we see, he sees actually the Lord. Ishta Deva Spurati. So now why is this? As Prabhupada mentions in Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeya Hrideshu Vilokayanti. Because the devotee is anointed with the love of God. He does not see anything else except the God. Just like Prabhu gives an example of when the mother sees child is away, but when mother sees the clothes of the child or something related to the child, immediately the mother is remembering the child. The mother is not seeing that as a socks, that is not seeing as something which is visible outwardly, but seeing the relationship of that with the child and immediately remembering the child. Similarly, when we advance in spiritual life, we also see through as we develop our vision, spiritual vision, and in the case of pure devotees out of love, they see everything in relationship with the Lord. In fact, they see the Lord. And as we saw in the previous verses also, the Lord is instructing us as how we should perceive the Lord even in this material world. Rasoham apsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashisureya pranava sarva vedeshu shabdake paurusham nishu. So as we drink water, the taste of water is the Supreme Lord, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras, and the sound in ether and ability in man. So ability in man, we see all activities we need to do, we need to have some ability. That ability is coming from the Lord. So wherever we see any ability, we can see that it is coming from the Lord. And the sound in ether, we are all hearing different forms of sound. The Lord is saying, I am that. And then I am the taste of the water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om. So if we carefully hear from the Shastras and remember the Lord as it is described here, then we can see that everywhere the Lord, we can, as soon as we see anything, hear anything, perceive anything, do something, we can see actually the cause of all this is the Supreme Lord. If not for the Lord, if we do not have this body, we do not have any of this ability to perform any of the activities. If the Lord is not maintaining us by providing us with water, air, whatever necessary facilities for our maintenance, how can anything happen? So in every aspect, the Lord's presence is felt. At the same time, Prabhupada says, we are not like Ramakrishna mission or some other mission that we say that this inert object is also God. This is a manifestation of the God. So one has to perceive the difference between energetic and the energy. While there is a simultaneous difference, there is also a certain oneness. So that aspect of vision is to be developed. While there is a distinction, there is also a similarity. And as we also saw in the previous verses, Bhumi Rapo Analo Vayur Kham Mano Buddhi Revacha Ahankara Iti Amme Bhinna Prakriti Rasada. So these are the different inferior energies of the Lord. So these are the 8 kinds of different material energies which are separated from the Supreme Lord. So these are also connected to the Lord. These are also coming from the Lord. And therefore, when advanced devotee sees these different forms of energy, he sees, oh, all these are manifestation of the Supreme Lord. He does not disconnect the energies of the Lord from the energetic, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada says, just like we rise in the morning, we see the sunrise, we see in the evening the moonlight, so we can immediately recollect that the presence of the Lord, and that is how a pure devotee sees. Such a universal vision of Vasudeva precipitates one's full surrender to the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna as the highest goal. So when one has understood that seeing everything as a manifestation of the Lord's different energies, and the Lord as completely spiritual, being present in the spiritual world. When one develops this vision, the natural outcome is that one becomes surrendered. One fully surrenders to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Now, such surrendered great souls are very rare. So it is very, very difficult task to surrender, because as we discussed earlier, the mental concoction and the fruitive nature of the living entity. The living entity is very, very fruitive. The living entity wants some immediate results for one's own self. Every activity is done with a motive to gain something for one's own self, either gross in terms of money, in terms of some wealth, in terms of some enjoyment of different kinds. So there is a motivation of what is there for me, or what is there for my family, or there is a kind of speculation, mental speculation which goes on, which prevents one from understanding or surrendering. So these two tendencies are very, very difficult to overcome, and especially in Kali Yuga, just because of the two people having two different fruitive tendencies, simply they quarrel and fight. Simply the fight is because of everyone's interest thinks that this is my prime interest. There is no central interest, and therefore people start fighting, and there is no agreement upon anything. And what to say to agree to the supreme highest truth? Because people do not agree for anything. They think that my benefit is when I work hard for my enjoyment. Why should I surrender to someone else? Surrendering to someone else does not bring me fruitive benefit. It does not fit my mental speculation, because where do I use my mind and think if I surrender to anyone will actually benefit me? So the material mind says, no, never surrender to anyone. If you surrender, he will exploit you. So first you exploit them. Similarly, the fruitive mentality says, oh, if I surrender to him, my fruit will go away. My benefit, my enjoyment will go away. So why should I surrender to him? So this fruitive mentality and the mental speculation prevents one from surrendering to anyone. And importantly, because of this material conception, we also fail to understand to surrender to the spiritual master and to the Supreme Lord. But as we see from the prayers of Lord Brahma, only from hearing from a pure devotee of the Lord. But even to hear from the pure devotee of the Lord, one has to render devotional service with faith to a pure devotee. If one renders service to a pure devotee, then Vasudeva Katha Ruchi, then that taste for hearing will come. When that taste for hearing will come, then the Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes of material nature, immediately vanquishes from our heart these lower modes of nature, the lower tendencies, the desires, habits that we have. They cannot be gone by our endeavors. We need the Lord's mercy, as it is also said here, that the ultimate, the Mahabhagavad, as a pure devotees, they understand that Lord Krishna's mercy is everything. So from this understanding that by my ability I can achieve everything, to understanding that I need the mercy of the Lord. To receive the mercy of the Lord, I need the mercy of the spiritual master. So as it is said that there are three kinds of perfectionists, or who attain perfection: Nitya Siddhas, Kripa Siddha, and Sadhana Siddha. But in any case, one requires Kripa, especially mercy of the spiritual master. And to receive the mercy of the spiritual master, one must faithfully render service. One must faithfully execute instructions of the spiritual master. When one does that, then one also sees the reciprocation of the spiritual master. That further advances one's surrender to the spiritual master. So in this process, when one surrenders to the spiritual master, and receives the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the mercy of the Supreme Lord. It is by that process that we can advance in our surrender to the Supreme Lord. And here in the last thing, Prabhupada is quoting from Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and Prabhupada is saying, in this body there are powers of speaking, of seeing, of hearing, of mental activities, etc. But these are not important if not related to the Supreme Lord. Actually, Jiva Goswami, he has written wonderful literatures, and he has also written Hari Namamrita Vyakarana. So he was teaching the holy names of the Lord using grammar, Sanskrit grammar, as a means to glorify Lord and teach the Sanskrit grammar. And he has written various other literatures, and he says that if the power of speech or if the power of grammar, whatever it is there, if it is not meant to glorify the Lord, it is of no use. It is useless. And therefore, every writing of grammar, every writing of knowledge is only used to glorify the Lord. So one can be a scientist, one can be a grammarian, one can be just like we saw yesterday, some sportswoman, she won a prize in Commonwealth Games, and she was glorifying Lord Krishna as how Lord Krishna's mercy brought her this. So similarly, if all abilities that we have got, if you recognize that it is actually coming from the Lord and it must be used in the service of the Lord to glorify the Lord, then that is true perfection. So we have got different abilities, different functions, different things that we are doing, but when we see that these are all meant, it has to be connected, related in service to the Lord, then that is a proper utilization. So, and because Vasudeva is all pervading and everything is Vasudeva, the devotee surrenders in full knowledge. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's process of performing Sankirtana naturally brings us to this knowledge. As it is said, the process of chanting Hare Krishna mantra is meant to revive our consciousness and make our consciousness Krishna consciousness. So in this simple process of chanting, hearing Krishna Katha and taking prasadam can bring us to this process of understanding the ultimate truth that Vasudeva Sarvamiti, and by chanting and hearing, by surrendering ourselves when we chant and hear, so the easiest form of surrender test for us, our surrender is when we chant, are we hearing? Is Lord more important to me or something else is more important to me? So when I'm not conscious of the Lord, I'm surrendering to my mind, to various activities. But when I surrender to hearing the holy name of the Lord, I'm actually making further advancement in my surrender. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Granthiraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari.